Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. At the future is PX. We're talking about personal experience today in day one of our speaker series. Today we have four incredible panelists who are kicking off our speaker series, and I am beyond thrilled to be able to welcome this crew. And I'm going to say crew with a capital C because these folks are legends, all in their various crafts, from CEOs and founders to CMOs to unapologetic truth tellers. We have the full gamut represented here today. So as we've mentioned a few times, if anybody joined us yesterday for our 5 to 9 Fest, YOUniverse is all about you. What we believe here at Alyce and what we believe is going to be the next trend and is the next trend in business is this concept of PX, or personal experience. So during today's session, I invited a few folks, a few friends of mine, to come help talk about how the future is PX and what we can do to build more personal experiences in the way we conduct ourselves in business. A couple of housekeeping rules, because it is a webinar and we are in this phase where we have to have some housekeeping rules. The first thing is that I'm going to actually disable the chat now so that people cannot chat until it's time for some QA control. So when we go into the chat, please save those for the last 15 minutes. After about 45 minutes of chatting with everybody here in the panel, we will get everybody to pick-pile into the chat and ask any questions or congratulate our panelists for being such phenomenal human beings, because they are, and you should congratulate them for that. After 45 minutes have elapsed, if you do have any questions, jot them in the chat as well too throughout this, because we will come back and we will double back on things that you may have missed through this session. Other than that, please enjoy. Like, the folks that we have brought in here are experts in these concepts of personal experience, and their expertise is really going to be just this informal, lighthearted conversation. And without further ado, I should just stop talking about how awesome these people are and actually tell you why they are awesome. Our first guest is going to be Ryan Bonici, who's 5 to 9, or what he does after he hangs up his CMO hat, is that he's a proud papa of some pups, 2, I believe, right, Ryan?
Yep, Toto and Levi. They're just running around, so you might hear them at some point.
Excellent. They might make a guest appearance. We're fingers crossed for that. Ryan enjoys being outdoors hiking. He's currently actually lakeside up there in Michigan, but not after having spent some time in Bali. I think you were hoping you might actually stay in Bali before all of us were quarantined at home.
I know, I should have flown out a few weeks later.
No, it's okay. We're glad to have you here in our time zone, or relative time zone, so you can join us for YOUniverse. But you might also know Ryan from his 9 to 5, where he is the CMO of G2. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Katie Martell, who is a dear friend of mine, but also in her 5 to 9, she spends a lot of time with table lighters. I had to be educated on what a table lighter is, Katie. And I can, right over your shoulder, we have quite a vast collection here. Look at these.
They're fascinating, right? They're just like regular lighters, but they come from an era where you leave these around the house. So they're all beautifully designed. I have a magpie obsession with them.
That's so cool. So when you're not collecting table lighters and, blowing people's minds on this like very interesting collection that you have, you're also out there playing softball, right? You're out there, you play in a recreational league on in the summertime, in the fall?
It's a summer league, and it's really a beer league that is an excuse to get together and drink with my friends.
Ah, I see.
Very serious softball.
So you're a beer drinking team with some softball problems. I got it.
You understand.
Perfect. But you also probably know Katie from her 9 to 5, where she is the host of Exceptional Truths out there on LinkedIn. And she's actually currently working on a documentary. Katie, tell us a little bit about the documentary.
It's interesting. It looks at the intersection of marketing and social movements, and it's called Pandemonium. So I'll let you deduce what it's about, and it's in the process right now. So we're hoping to release it later this year with a book as well. If anyone's interested in being part of it, shameless plug, do let me know. I'd love to interview marketers about this.
Fantastic. Well, we will circle back around a little bit about this concept that you're talking about with the social movements, because I think personal experience is a really important part of that conversation you're having in your documentary. Also on our panel, we have Amy Spurling, who spends a lot of time hiking. She was just saying that she spent some time out there in the White Mountains, and there could be a cross-country road trip on the horizon where she works from the road. We'll see how that goes. But if she's not out there hiking, spending time being one with nature, she's definitely being one with the Real Housewives of New York and New Jersey, which candidly are my two favorite housewives.
They're just very realistic.
Yeah, right? Everything, I identify with everything that these folks are doing. Yes, of course. In addition to all of these amazing things that Amy does in her free time, she's also the CEO and co-founder of Compt. And we have a huge congratulations that are overdue for you, Amy. Last week, you guys at Compt just secured Series A. Is that right?
Seed series.
Seed series. Congratulations. That's
Thank
huge.
you. Thank you. Yeah, definitely was not planning on fundraising in the middle of a pandemic. So really glad that it worked out as well as it did. And we've got pretty awesome investors.
I am thrilled for you. You do have awesome investors, but that's due in large part to the fact that you have an awesome product with what you're doing at Compt. So we will circle back around and give people a little bit of teaser about what you're up to and what you're doing to help facilitate personal experience between companies and their employees. Last but certainly not least, a former colleague of mine when we were back under the sprocket when we worked at HubSpot together, Ellie Mirman is joining us, who is a huge art fan. So you're working on some painting and printmaking. Are you working on anything right now in your printmaking or painting?
I'm trying to get back into painting, and it's funny, my home office that I've now had to use much more than I've ever had to use used to just be used for any of my art projects. So I'm actually using my art desk for my home office now. So it's been fun to have all of my art supplies surrounding me.
So your 5 to 9 and your 9 to 5 are literally just like spread out directly in front of you right now.
Pretty much. Yep.
Nice. Nice. And now you're also working with America's Test Kitchen, and you are working your way through the perfect cookie cookbook at this moment.
Yes. So we have, what inspired this was that we do an annual cookie competition at Crayon. And so the first year I made a raspberry Linzer cookie that won. And so I felt like, oh my gosh, I've got to, bring my cookie game every single year. And I'm on the hunt for the perfect cookie, and America's Test Kitchen cookbook has been amazing for that. Just so many great recipes. So my hope is maybe quarantine will give me the opportunity to work my way through the whole book.
Phenomenal. Wow, that is pretty impressive. And, if you did happen to need a guest appearance to judge the cookie, any of us on the panel,
I'll just box them up, ship them out.
Right? Well, and so speaking of Crayon, you are the CMO at Crayon. That's correct, right?
Yep, that's right. Last 3 years.
Fantastic. Crayon's doing some really cool things, especially, well, right now you guys are working on a bunch of web series as well, too. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on from content creation side.
Yeah, I mean, content and education has been a big part of our marketing approach anyhow, but now with everyone at home and hungry to learn and hungry to connect, we've been doing a couple of virtual boot camps, bringing together product marketers, bringing together CI, competitive intelligence folks. So we did our product marketing boot camp last week. It was huge. We got a lot of great positive feedback. And then we've got our competitive intelligence one this Friday afternoon.
All right. All right. So we got another shameless plug. You can be in Katie's documentary, or you can join this webinar with Katie of Ellie and competitive intelligence. Fantastic. All right. So that's now you're starting to see with our guests that are joining us today, all the little bits and pieces of why we've invited this powerhouse of a lineup to help us kick off our speaker series around personal experience. So I want to start off by spending some time talking about, the tenets, the core tenets of personal experience. And we kind of distill that down into the 3 R's: relatability or relatable, respectfulness, and relevancy. And as I think about relatability and I think about powering, being that, relatable connection with someone, celebrating their 5 to 9, I'm really interested to hear, Amy, how you spend time at Compt helping to fuel the 5 to 9 for employees, and how letting employees, with their relatability, with that life powered by 5 to 9, actually helps them produce better results at their company.
Yeah, I mean, we firmly believe that you're not like a 2-bucket person where it's like, okay, this is the me at work and the me at home. We're whole human beings where, you may be dealing with the fact that your kid is going crazy right now, you know, running around, and you're trying to figure out how to manage that. At the same time, you're trying to get, you know, an outbound campaign out, and like everything is blended. And that's happening not just now, it happens on a regular basis for everyone. So our concept at Compt is looking at how we allow companies to support their employees in a way that the employees get to kind of control, manage, and stipulate, but still have it align with company culture and goals. So as a company, they can say, hey, we want to support families, but they aren't going to dictate what that means. They're not going to say a family, it looks like this, it sounds like this, you know, it's you and your spouse and your kid. It's basically letting the employee think about, all right, what does family mean to me? Maybe that is figuring out how I connect with my in-laws, or, you know, my cousins, or however that kind of looks and feels to me. It's allowing me to determine who's in my family and how I want to be supported and encouraged by my company.
Nice. And I think, you know, knowing that your company has your back is a really important motivator for them. But can you explain a little bit more of the ways that companies actually have your back, and what you're doing to actually help power people's personal? You mentioned kids, you mentioned households, all that stuff. I'd love to hear more.
One of our customers, so the way companies do this is they set up stipends where they're giving certain amounts of money to employees to spend on these categories that the company has selected. But they're not dictating, there's no vendors, they're not saying, hey, here's a list of things you can choose from. One of our customers, it's pretty awesome. They had the family category enabled for their team, and one of their team members had their hot water heater blow up. And of course, like, nobody in HR is like, hey, new perk for the whole team, hot water heater replacement. That's not a thing. But the employee, like, is obviously going through the middle of something that is pretty, I mean, it was literally happening during the middle of the pandemic. Like, you're home, you're with your family, your hot water heater blows, you're trying to figure out how to fix that, you need hot water. And they were able to use their stipend to offset some of those costs. So it's a way for a company to really support you when you need it and how you need it, without it being this whole bureaucratic thing of, you know, requesting from HR and did they approve, and like getting rid of all of that back and forth, and really letting employees determine what support looks like to them as individuals. Right now we're seeing a lot of people wanting to pay it forward. So they're buying a lot of restaurant gift cards, a lot of acupuncture gift cards, you know, chiropractors, all kinds of stuff. So where they're putting money to work in the community for services they'll get later on. So it's a way for companies to support employees, to support communities, which is pretty awesome right now.
I love that you're able to facilitate that and empower employees to be able to do that with themselves at businesses. And that actually reminds me a lot of a campaign that Ryan, you and the team at G2 did to power and enable our customers to be able to not only leave reviews, but then give back, be philanthropic with their efforts to not only share accolades of the business that they love, but then pay it forward with some donations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're seeing right now, to Amy's point, there's so many people that want to give, and, you know, reviews are obviously, you know, a core part of the platform that is G2. We have millions of reviews now on the site, with, you know, hundreds of thousands coming in every month, and folks like would love to be able to, you know, do something like that and then be able to give something as a result. So we've been building houses in Haiti and helping other companies enable their employee to leave reviews and then donate money from G2 to whatever cause is really important for them. So I think, like, to Amy's point again, just giving employees that ability to really choose where their time and efforts go and where they're able to donate is key ultimately.
Nice. And I like what you're doing too, to foster and facilitate the building and deepening of trust between brands and their customers at G2, which is, I think that's a really powerful mechanism for helping to grow businesses. Can you spend a little bit more time explaining to everybody, like, the voice of the customer and the power that word of mouth has in being relatable and building the trust and foundation that you need to do better business, be more personal?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you just think about, you know, how the world has evolved in the last sort of 20 or so years, right? Like the real kind of like core tenet of marketing that always was the most effective, and I think in a lot of ways still is the most effective, is word of mouth marketing, right? We trust our family, we trust our friends, we trust our peers. And so G2 is really built off of the genesis of that understanding, as opposed to the old school model of, you know, listening to one analyst and listening to predominantly a man, his opinion of, you know, what is the best insert software category name, right? And I think we started to see, obviously, that not only were their recommendations lagging by multiple years, but these companies were buying time with analysts, and it's very much a pay-to-play model. And I've played that game, right, in my time at many previous SaaS companies in the past. And so we started to see that people were buying software, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on software that wasn't used. And then they were stuck in these long-term contracts with these providers. And so we built G2 a few years ago, really off of that basis of, people should be able to connect with their peers en masse, and personalize all of those reviews, right? So when you go to g2.com, you can say, hey, I am a company with 100 employees. My budget is X. I'm looking to buy a CRM software. And then we will look at, the tens of thousands of reviews of all the CRM tools out there and match people that look like you with similar budgets to you and similar needs to you and say, hey, based on all of the things that you've told us, these are the software providers that are the best suited for you. So we're helping people lower costs and we're helping them reach their potential faster in their business. But yeah, on the buyer side, I guess we asked thousands of buyers just a few months ago, what they use when they're making these decisions. And the top three things they said were, they want to be able to speak to their peers. They want to be able to read reviews, and they want to be able to learn from companies about their tools and services. So it's really important to buyers. And on the seller side, I think now is a really interesting time where marketing campaigns aren't always as effective in times right now, and messaging is super key. And so we're seeing lots of companies really start to realize, hey, now when things are slow, let's double down on reviews so that when things pick back up, we will be the leader on the G2 grid. And we'll be ready to take advantage of the revenues that are coming in. So yeah, really interesting time. And I think whether you're thinking about trust in the sense of buying software, or trust in terms of building connections with your employees, or just trust in the community, right? I think trust is just becoming more and more important. And there's a lot of sources out there today that create problems in, whom and what we trust.
Yeah, I think you said it really well just a moment ago about the fact that so people are trusting the word of mouth of complete strangers on the internet, and they are less likely to trust what brands are saying. But I think, Katie, with the work that you're doing right now, you're spending a lot of time working with those brands to help them understand and orient themselves to the way they are messaging. Especially now to the time of this recording and giving the circumstances we're in socially right now, but you're also stretching far beyond the snapshot in time we are in to help companies be more self-aware and understand that their messaging can be more personal and not pandering.
Yeah, and Ryan brings up a great point. We have to look at what we do in the context of the past 20 years plus of what marketing has always been, right? And I think if we try to market in a bubble, we're going to fail. And I think this is where the context of what marketing has done to trust over the past even 100 years is so important. We've literally spent 100+ years of marketing putting people in boxes because that's what the tools afforded us the ability to do. We could segment only as far as we can segment, right? But what that's done is it's really created this mistrust between any marketing and consumers. One of my favorite studies, which I have no idea the point now, but I will credit it in a tweet somewhere, says that 4% of people trust marketing. Single digit 4% of people trust the institution of marketing. And I think a lot of companies have to operate with that awareness that trust is it's not an equilibrium. You're not starting with the opportunity to build trust. You're starting from that deficit of 4% believe what you're saying at any given time. This is where the rise of reviews and word of mouth has become so critical, to Ryan's point, because you can't trust what companies say. But look at all the marketing we're seeing around COVID, around the pandemic. It's these companies, a lot of times with broadcast messaging, but even in B2B, saying, we're here for you. We see you. We got you. And they forget that buyers look at that with this lens of skepticism, right? They're looking at it going, what? You haven't been there for me before. How dare you try to, earn my trust now? And so I think about trust as the core of what marketing is. It's what we have to do now. Attention is no longer the goal. It is about trust. Attention is easy to manipulate. All 5 of us on this panel know how to generate attention. We are really good at it. All of us have personal brands that generate attention. It's about how we earn that trust that I think more companies are starting to realize is the function of marketing. And I look at that not in terms of saying, hey, you should trust us. Even buyer reviews to an extent only go so far. Trust is built by competence. Can I quiz the panel? Can I do a little game show moment for a minute? Okay. Who is the most trusted company in America? Is it Google, Amazon, Microsoft, or Oracle? Amy, what do you think?
Trusted. I mean, maybe Google.
Okay. Brian?
Ooh, no way, Amy. I'm going to say Oracle because I think just most people don't know it.
How about you, Ellie?
I think I'll go in a similar vein. I would go Microsoft. Been around a long time. Yeah, seems like it would be highly trusted.
Seems legit. How about you, MK?
My gut went straight with Amy on Google. I think we give Google so many nuggets, so many kernels of our insights into our life. We don't even realize it most of the time.
Yep.
You guys ready for the fact that, thank you for setting me up so perfectly. Amazon is the most trusted company among
Wow.
Amazon. And I know that they get a ton of bad press, but look at what Amazon does. Despite everyone hating Jeff Bezos for being a millionaire, billionaire, trillionaire, despite the whole worker conditions, people trust Amazon because Amazon does what it says it's going to do. In fact, people trust it more than they trust the government or the press. People trust Amazon to deliver you a package when they say they're going to deliver it. They trust them to have that wide breadth of options, and they trust them to do what they say they're going to do. That's where trust is built. It's confidence. It's, are we showing up the way that we promised to? Are we delivering it? And that's where in B2B, that sales process, what we're talking about today, how you show up for buyers before the deal, speaks everything. Speaks volumes about what it's going to be like to do business with you. And that, I think, is where more companies need to focus, is building that trust before the deal. Mic drop.
So it's almost as if actions are speaking louder than words for most of these consumers when it comes to building trust. And I'm curious to hear, Ellie, as you're helping to build out not just, the actions themselves, but you're also helping to measure and track actions. Speak to us a little bit more about like Crayon's approach to using data to help either course correct or reinforce and help someone double down on the things that are working in those trust building moments.
Yeah, I think that there's such an interesting combination of, I guess, the quantitative data side of all the things that we can learn. I mean, Amazon's actually the perfect example of that, right? Amazon has a lot of data about who we are, what we want, like the products that we both buy or even just look at. So we can, as marketers, there's so much more access to data that can help inform a lot of our marketing. And then combining that with actually looking at almost like the stories behind that data. So actually taking that micro look, not just the macro look of, who is this person? What do we see in terms of their type of engagement? It's particularly helpful, I think, for surfacing trends that you're not always looking for is the biggest thing. I think the quantitative data is really helpful for seeing the high level trends, validating any sort of hypotheses that you have about, we really see a lot of people loving our battle card content, whatever it might be. But actually looking and speaking with people, and that's where you can actually learn what their challenges are that are even leading them to that content. You uncover so much more that helps you figure out, all right, what data do we even want to collect? So combining kind of that micro macro view, the story and the analytical view, I think is really helpful. And even when you think about engaging your internal teams around any of the takeaways that you have, there are the more analytical folks who want to see the data and want to see the charts and the graphs and all that. And then there are other folks who want to see the stories. You think about, say, the CFO versus, a salesperson. The way that they're going to, really absorb any sort of takeaway that you have about who your customers are, who your prospects are, how we're going to serve them, all of that. You kind of need both sides of the story.
Nice. Yeah. And then we just had a comment come through that John said that, consistently saying what you'll do, when you'll do it, and what the results will be. And it sounds like the results may change depending on internally what those results and desired results are going to be. But the result should always be, if we're going to take a page from Amazon's book, that you're going to say what you're going to do to your consumers and you're going to do it. You're going to execute against it and build trust through the action speaking louder than your words. That's
on
so
a separate
great.
side note, just on Amazon, actually, like for anyone that's interested in delving into this further, if you follow Jeff Bezos on Instagram, his PR and comms team are just the most incredible when it comes to really like building trust. And I think as a marketer, I view it from the lens of like, I'm aware that a PR person and a comms person is making him do these things. But, you know, he posted a video the other day where he's like walking through the Amazon warehouse and like elbow bumping people to be like, you know, thank you for my workers. And you can, I just find it really hard to kind of like connect the billionaire trillionaire like him with like this like other like kind of image of someone being a martyr. But anyway, he does it incredibly well. And if you just like gaze through the content, you can see that his audience really trusts him, at least those that are following him on Instagram.
Oh, see, I challenge that, and I challenge it with respect, Ryan. I think that is such BS in terms of what buyers think is legitimate. We have just as many memes in the world around, please pay your workers more, please don't fist bump them, pay them a livable wage, stop making them pee in bottles when they're delivering. I mean, I think if you look at the counter narrative that consumers, especially younger, you know, millennials, Gen Z, are bringing up against Amazon, man, that Instagram feed is just like, it is the most okay boomer thing I have ever heard of, right? It's such BS. I hear you, but I think you have to look at it like, what are they, and more brands than ever are realizing, people are looking at what you're doing. Right now, how brands treat workers is the #1 concern of buyers. Are you keeping them safe, or are you prioritizing profit over the pandemic? I think that is such a fascinating new dynamic. And Amy, you speak to this with what Compt does. Are you seeing your workers as human beings, right? And it's buyers are looking at that as part of this, you know, buying consideration, but purchase consideration. They care. They want to know exactly what your values are, not from what you say in an ad, but what you're doing throughout the all of the kind of stars that align in the business, from the suppliers to how you treat employees to how you then treat buyers. It is marketing as an extent of the whole business, not just this PR facade. But Ryan makes a great point. That's what we're used to. I'm a PR girl. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah, and I think he's just doing a great job at like trying to own the conversation a little bit. I also don't know who follows him, right? You know, if it's his employees that follow him, maybe he's trying to communicate to them and to show that he's in the trenches, or, you know, if it's investors, it's probably like a combination, obviously. To me, it does feel insincere, but I also view it, and I'm like, I think it's impressive also as a marketer that he is doing that in spite of the negative press.
I question whether or not people trust Amazon because stuff will show up in 24 hours, regardless of whether or not like they like Bezos or whoever.
Totally.
Like regardless of what the ads are. If you need toilet paper delivered, that's what you're going to do, is go on Amazon or any other billion different things that you need delivered. Like, it's not marketing, it's the showing up and actually delivering the goods. I would argue, regardless of the good press or the bad press. You're still using Amazon if you want stuff right now. Like, you don't really have another option. Like, the boutique store down the street is not open. You're using that. So like, some of that is like window dressing, one direction or another. I don't know how much it actually impacts how much they sell.
Yeah,
I think if you use like the Uber Lyft example though, oh sorry, MK, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think you bring up a good point though, of the difference between, you know, what you're saying in your marketing efforts, what you're doing in your selling efforts, and then the products, whether they be tangible products, software products, or even managed services that you're putting out there. That the end result of those products and the effect and impact that they're driving are ultimately what's driving trust for people. But I'm super curious to hear while the act of delivering on these things, like, where are those moments that we can start to explore to give a pre-demonstration, if you will, of the follow through or the end result, the actions that we're going to take? Amy, I'm curious, or Ellie, sorry, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are around what a brand can do to get to the point of actually even being able to act and show them that their actions are actually speaking louder than their words.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're talking about in terms of the product coming through, you see the same exact thing that happens pre-sale, where anytime you are delivering value and saying you're going to deliver value and actually deliver it and like follow through on that, that's, I mean, going back to what Katie was saying around building trust. You know, we are starting at a deficit. So when we can start to build that relationship and engage people by giving them something of value, and that can be, you know, at a very high level, it's, you know, anything that you can offer, maybe it's content, that sort of thing. But then, of course, getting to the whole topic of personal experiences, personalization is, you know, when you can actually deliver something of value that is specific to that person, that shows that you went that extra mile and that you actually care and that you're not treating them like another number, right? The number of, when we were kind of leading up to this, we were talking a lot about prospecting emails, right? I head up the marketing team. I work really close with sales, and we just redid all of our messaging that the sales team was sending out immediately because things were just so drastically different. But it was a nice opportunity for us to step back and say, how are we actually connecting with the people that we're trying to reach, so that we're not just another, auto archive, auto delete type of email, because I've been on the other side of that. And anytime I see something that is just so canned and doesn't actually offer any value to me, doesn't reference anything about me, even just like the very bare minimum of like where I work, what our product does, what, anything else about my career, even just the professional side of it, it's just astonishing how many canned emails I get that could have gone to, not just any of us, but like anyone who works in the business world. I was like, nope, not even going to bother giving them the time of day.
Yeah. My new favorite phrase, not favorite, my eye roll phrase now is now more than ever. That phrase is making my skin crawl right now. I'm like, no, not now. It should have always been your practice to care about me from start to finish, not just my job title or what segment you put me in, my persona. You should have been caring about me as a person this whole time.
Yeah.
It sounds like caring is pandering.
Yeah. Is that the sequel documentary, Katie?
Yeah.
Those are the t-shirts I'm going to sell. Sharing is pandering. I love this point. I think what you know about buyers is evident in every interaction, and how little you know about them speaks volumes. It is so clear in those, whether it's an automated email sequence or something that an SDR team is sending out to what you're direct mailing them. It is so clear to a buyer immediately whether or not they've taken the time to learn about them more than I'm a head of marketing at a mid-sized company with a fast grow rate and I use Marketo. Like, there is so much information we know about buyers that doesn't reach them at a level that makes them go, oh, I feel seen. Like Oprah says, like on her finale, do y'all know what Oprah said in the last show she ever did on the Oprah Winfrey Show? I'm going to Oprah.
I blocked it out. I was just too sad that show was coming to an end, and I just blacked out.
I feel like it's a cliche to quote Oprah, but we need to quote Oprah. Oprah says that every interview she's ever done ends with the person kind of turning to her, and it can be a president, it could be a celebrity, and they go, "Was that okay?" And in that moment, they reveal this like universal human truth that people just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be told you're okay. They want to be felt like they are understood. I mean, I know this is getting kind of touchy-feely, but you have to remember that when you're trying to build a relationship with a buyer, like this is somebody who wants to feel like you've seen them at a level that goes beyond their business card. Personas where I think the initial foray into trying to figure that out, well, let's look at what all IT directors care about. But even that didn't go far enough. And this is where I think tools like Alyce, not paid endorsement, are great because it gives marketers this ability. Ellie, you're automating all your sequences, right? And your SDR team is working from templates. A tool like Alyce gives marketing teams permission to almost be human, but still do it at scale, because that's what we have to do today. I'm so excited about the direction of this because it gets us away from treating people like, hi, you're just an IT director and the 5 of us here are just marketers. We're so different on this panel. Look at just this one little example of how nuanced human beings are. We don't have the tools to reach people at scale until something like Alyce is adopted. Again, I really should just get commission. Can I just get to
I was going to say, I'm going to go because I don't think I need to be here anymore facilitating this conversation. Katie's got this, guys. See you later.
Need my address for the check.
No, but I appreciate what you're saying, and that's actually kind of where I want us to start poking holes in, or just talking a little bit more now about the fact that, that we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of resources. It started off with some more methodology-based resources like persona development, and then that persona development moved into personalization, where we could take the kernels, the little nuggets of data that we found, and insert them to deliver a more tailored messaging. But now I think we're starting to use data in really interesting ways. And Ryan, I think G2 is doing something interesting with the intent data that you're using to give more clarity and context into the phases of someone's buying decision. How do you at G2 fold in that intent data, but also keep it personal so it's not creepy?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've found is that, you know, we were talking a little bit about cold outreach and things like that, is that, you know, the reality is that typically if you're cold outreaching to someone, they're most likely not in the market for what you're selling them, right? Like you've chosen their information based off of their persona and segmentation. You've said, okay, like that is someone that can buy us. But the reality is most people don't need what you're selling them at that point in time if you have decided to start that conversation. And so we started to realize that maybe a year or two ago at G2. And so we delivered and built this product called Buyer Intent. And the whole idea is it helps sellers, so at software companies or service companies, identify if a company is actually surging in their category of software. So, you know, Amy, I'm not sure like what your category of software is called. Is it like employee retention, or what would you call that?
It either falls under rewards and recognition or just HR tech in general.
Sure, yeah. So like, you know, if a company was kind of looking at rewards and recognition software now more than ever.
Don't do it. Not on this webinar.
Given they're working from home, and you know, companies are having to sort of like repurpose their office budgets and, you know, still create value at home. You know, these signals are helping companies start to connect in the moment when someone is actively looking. And then we kind of heard from customers that were using it. They were like, love this, but we want to also know, hey, if someone's not using our product and they're not succeeding with it, like we want to be able to help them rediscover what they could be doing with the platform to use it better. And so we created churn signals, which then allows companies to say, okay, if someone is using my reward and recognition software and they're now back on G2 looking at other tools, then clearly the product hasn't delivered. And so that gives then that company that indication, that intent signal that, okay, we really need to reconnect. And ideally you would set this up 6 months prior to, or earlier even, prior to them renewing, so that, you know, you can re-engage and help recreate the value for them. So yeah, it's a really kind of interesting space. Speaking, I think, of just like software and everything and experiences, I had this crazy experience with two providers recently where we were, you know, naturally cutting our budgets at G2 and just looking at areas where we could be more and more efficient. And so I let a few different MarTech providers go that we hadn't really been using and we hadn't been getting much value out of. And it was crazy how different the experiences were of those two companies. One of them tried to lock me into the contract and say, hey, the money that you have put into the account, you won't ever get back, which was like $30,000 that we were going to lose. The other company, which did a similar thing, they were like, hey, no worries, when things are good, let us know. And then they sent me a book to read about like their space. And I was like, okay, when we renegotiate with one of these companies, like I know who I'm going with, right? The company that like was super respectful, understood like what I was going through, needing to cut budgets, and really delivered a one-to-one experience for me. So yeah, really interesting space. I took that and a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
I think that articulates the point extraordinarily well. I mean, the whole point of this is to turn these moments that were previously one to many because of the mechanisms we had, personas, personalization, and turn those moments into those one-to-one moments, and to pull Katie's point about, you know, what Oprah said, like we want people to feel seen, right? We want to all be mini Oprahs running around out here, getting that side of vulnerability, getting that side of authenticity in people. And the only way you can do that is by going that step closer to be able to deliver that one-to-one experience, one-to-one connection and moment with people. So I'm curious, you know, as we are thinking about this, we kind of circled around this fact, but I want to address the fact head on, the fact that a company's culture should reinforce what we've just mentioned, that one-to-many, that one-to-one. And thinking through what you're working on at Compt, Amy, and how you're thinking about empowering companies to deliver that one-to-one experience, there's got to be something in there about a company embodying this and then that expression turning itself outward.
Yeah, we definitely see that where there's companies that we work with that are focused. I mean, their whole thing is about personalization. Their products that they have in the market are all about personalization, and they've realized they've got to do that for their own employees at the same time. Like that does need there's an inconsistency there if you aren't kind of showing the two things together. What's been really interesting to watch, and my co-founder Sarah, who's a former HubSpotter, and I talk about this a lot, is that marketing, like HR is right behind, well, maybe like 5 years behind marketing, where you had marketing personas, buyer personas, all that. companies started doing the same thing with employees, where you've got employee personas and you start putting employees in boxes. But what's crazy is that, I mean, every single person needs and wants something different. So companies are trying to figure out, all right, how do we actually meet every single person's individual needs? The kind of what we're going through now has accelerated that, because every single person's situation at home is very, very different. You don't have a consistent work experience when everybody's in their own house, because everybody's house is different. And so companies are having to rapidly kind of iterate on that, which has been really interesting to watch, where, you know, some people have pets, some have kids, some are in very small apartments with multiple roommates. You know, you've got people in New York who bed share, you know, because they were working different shifts. Like, it's just a very different environment for folks. And so how you enable and support that is very different across companies.
Yeah, and then the permission that gives folks, once they know that you've got their back in that same way, then they can approach their work with that same level of intention, that same level of authenticity.
Well, it changes up the way HR has been framed for decades. Is it's very parental. You know, we're going to give you something, even calling it rewards and recognitions. Like, that's my compensation. Why is it a reward? Like, I'm doing a job here. It's part of what you owe me. And so why are you dictating or deciding for me, like a parent, like, these are the things that are good for you. Like, here's your array of vegetables. I love vegetables, but just saying, like, the whole concept behind Compt is like, look, we're all adults. No head of HR, which I've been several times. Like, I don't have the ability to say this mental health app is the one you should use. I'm not a trained professional. I should not be making that call. Employees need to be able to do that for themselves, or decide how their family needs to be supported, or their health and wellness, or whatever else. Like, employees are adults. Treat them like adults and let them be whole human beings. And you're going to have a very different experience between the company employee relationship. And then that's going to trickle into, you know, how they're treating your customers as well.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, there was that ad there for a while, Wisconsin, that was like, happy cows make happy cheese. And not that I'm implying that any of you or your workforces are cows, but the way that you treat them does act as a forcing function for the output of the work that they do. And I think, yeah, that I'm looking at this as like concentric circles. How you treat your team is going to be the extension that they offer of personal experiences to the customers that you're working with. And then those customers in return will start talking about and touting that experience to feed that ecosystem over and over and over again.
Totally.
Very nice. Very cool. We did get a question, and I might just toss this out there just to see where this question goes. I think it's a really well articulated question. It looks, person's name is Aporacaro. We'll try that one again another time. But the question is, how do you best walk the fine line between personalization and pandering when sending prospective communication? I see the word pandering in there, so I know Katie's already like crawling out of her skin to do.
Did you see me pause? Because I was like, does anyone else want, let me take, but please don't let me own this dialogue, guys. I'd love to hear what you guys say. I love that question, and thank you for asking it. I think that the mistake we make with personalization is something that Ellie said earlier about uncovering trends that you're not looking for. I think the assumptiveness that a lot of companies have about knowing their buyers gets in the way sometimes. And I think we assume that we know everything we need to know about our buyers, despite the fact that they're changing and evolving constantly. And that's where the difference between pandering and personalization exists. Pandering is just saying what you think someone wants to hear in order to gain their favor. Happens all the time in politics, right? I think it's a concept that is born in politics, but it applies to marketing. It's easy to say whatever we want. Personalization, you know, by its very definition, means that you've done the work to uncover what it is these people actually need. And I'll give you an example of an evolving trend that's happening. I mean, again, I hate to be like the token elder millennial here who's like referring to Gen Z, but we have to look at Gen Z. They are increasingly living outside of definitions that we have relied on in terms of, segmenting our audience. They look at what they do as hobbies. They look at what they do far more than who they are. For example, being a biracial 17-year-old male doesn't really make these Gen Z buyers feel like they're hurt. It's the fact that they play soccer and the fact that they're in Fortnite and the fact that they are XYZ. They're starting to kind of self-verticalize outside of what we marketers have given them as definitions. This also applies to gender. There's a big trend happening in user experience where folks that are outside of the gender dichotomy, which is more and more people now that we're starting to give the vocabulary to others to understand this segment of the population, they live in a world where they're presented by male or female in our apps, in our websites, in our forms, whatever it is. More and more UX principles are coming into play where companies are asking the question, how do you want to be identified? The fact that they will now give them the option of identifying or even just a space to insert what gender pronoun they want, that shows the companies that are taking the time to understand what buyers need. A lot of times it's far outside things that we, white, cis, heteronormative presenting people assume. We are not the buyer. And I think this principle is universal, very old. We are not the buyer. But this is where it's coming into play. You personalize when you take the time to gather the insight that you may not have thought of as the reality of your buyers. And it's how you show up that distinguishes you from those who pander versus those who are authentic and genuine with how they literally care. Literally, to your point, MK, respect the people that they are serving.
So I like that approach of saying, I don't know anything or everything, and why don't you guide me in that direction?
Very Socratic, yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Anybody have anything they want to respond to that with, or yes and or no but in that? That's my favorite part when people say like no but.
Like a yes and to that. I think though, I'm yes into that in like theory and in principle. I just think that there's a reason though why marketers do the shorthand of segments, right? And it's not because there's malice at all. I genuinely don't think. I think it's more of like, how do you actually operationalize like what your team's job is and driving the outcomes that you're responsible for. And so, yeah, I think to your point, Katie, the biracial male Gen Y might not be helpful. But a brand and a marketer is never obviously articulating that to the person directly. They are then adjusting. You would hope, anyways, unless they had a really bad personalization error in their emails. That's like calling some of the things that they know about the person. But I do think there are challenges because, and I think in the last 10 years, we've over-indexed on automation and we've over-indexed in like scalability of things. And we've definitely under-indexed in the personal and the one-to-one. And I think there's a course correction happening, but I don't think it's all with bad intent. And I think the more we talk about it, obviously, and I think as a good example, Katie, when you talked about your documentary, I Googled it and then sent a link to my team because I loved how you said like rainbow washing and just these certain things. I was like, guys, as a team, we should be aware of this. Like we shouldn't be doing these things unless it's authentic to us as opposed to like trying to pander. And I don't think anyone would think about that, but without the language, sometimes it's to formalize the understanding. So yeah, that was my end.
But I think you're right, Ryan, is we hear this a lot at Alyce. We talk with teams about PX or personal experience and they're like, yeah, we totally get it. We love it. Like qualitatively, it makes a ton of sense. Now, how do we deploy this and do it at scale? It is like, there is going to be that like the juxtaposition of like, yes, we know the desired state, we know all of this stuff, but it's hard to turn a cruise ship that has been sailing in this direction, that has been using the same automation, personalization, all these little things that we have been doing for so long. It's hard for us to change on a dime and pivot. We have some awesome questions coming in through the chat. So I'm actually just going to go in and let the audience kind of fuel the last portion of today's conversation. We had a question come in that says, in these current times, we've lost sensitivity around how people respond and react to our content. What are some of the ways we can improve customer experience to gain trust through that content that we serve to them?
Not everyone at once, guys.
I know, right? I might pick on you a little bit, Ellie, because you and I are also former HubSpotters. Ryan, I know you are as well too, but we were built in we were cut from the fabric of content creation and how content and what you serve, when you serve it and why you're serving it is so important to the experience you're delivering to your customers. What are your thoughts around this question and using content to improve the customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of using content for a lot of different purposes. I feel like I've said this many times, but I feel like it's the Swiss Army knife of marketing, where it just works for literally everything. Acquisition, engagement, retention, just education, all that. I don't know if I have seen that the sensitivity around reacting to the response around our content has changed, but maybe that's just because we think about content so much on my team. I think of it as, I think it's kind of connecting to the broader conversation around the importance of thinking about engagement more than, or not, just so that acquisition is not the sole focus. I think a lot of marketing is very focused on whatever it takes to get that person to take whatever action we care about. And when it comes to personalization, when it comes to content, especially in times like these, we need to focus that much more on engagement and the long-term relationship. And so thinking through, what do I need to do for that person to be a customer 3 years from now? Not just, how do I get them to click on this button right now? And I think that shifting that mindset is what's really needed, say, when we talk about the culture of the team, or even when we think about some of the metrics that we goal ourselves on, thinking about what are those, what puts us on the right path to continue to have that relationship with that customer in, 3 years down the line, 5 years, 10 years down the line, and what do we need to communicate internally around, who those people are, what's effective, that sort of thing. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier around telling those stories. I think I'm very much a data-driven marketer. I've taught, my team to act in that way too. But we have to balance that out. When you only talk about, say, leads and customers and all of that in the context of how many did we get in a particular month, then it dehumanizes it a lot. And so it's really important to, there have been times when I've looked at a particular, even still leaning on the data, looking at a particular lead record and seeing, what are the actions that they took, what were the, what's the path that they took, what do I know about them from, say, even just LinkedIn. That can help add a lot more color to those numbers, and it gives a new perspective to how you think about content, where, there might be a piece of a particular ebook that doesn't perform as well as others, doesn't get as many downloads. But when you actually see the people who are engaging with that piece of content, you actually learn that they're actually your most engaged prospects. Those are the people that we should be talking to. How do we best serve them? They're the best fits, et cetera, et cetera. I think getting, again, down to that micro level and sharing those stories internally can help people stay sensitive to that.
So content's also such a broad thing, right? Because at the end of the day, content is like all aspects of marketing are content. Like you can't like market without content, even if it's just like a one-word slogan, right? And so I think what I'm kind of pulling from that question is, I think it depends if the content is what someone was looking for, or if it was something that they were pushed upon them, right? And an ad is a good example of something that is being pushed upon someone, as opposed to something like a blog post where they've maybe Googled it and they've found it. And I think in the case of a blog post, right, it's pretty simple in that, like, just ask with a pop-up, like, did you like this content or not? Thumbs up, thumbs down, was it helpful, right? Really quickly, easy way to get feedback. If it's an ad, on the other hand, it's really different, right? And the most initial thing that came to mind was the Pepsi debacle with was it Kylie Jenner or one of the Kardashians? You know who, I'm not sure. And it, I think it was like, was it whitewashing? I can't remember like what the issue was at hand, but it got absolutely smashed because it just like was really tone deaf. And I think that got, like, obviously that has its own issues, but because of the fact that it was being pushed out to people and they weren't choosing to see it, I think there's like a higher level of critique in those sorts of cases. And just in the same way, if a company had a massive, let's say, like, issue where someone on their team did something wrong and there was like an LGBTQ harassment sort of a case, if they all of a sudden next week, and it's like Pride Month, make their logo the Pride thing, like, probably not the right time, right, to like just all of a sudden swing your culture of your company to look as if you were trying to now be one with this community that now had an issue with your employment issues. So I think it's like so relevant to the context of the content too, and that's just my takeaway from that question.
I completely agree that context is really important, and the timing of that context is also super, super important. We had another question come in, continuing on the thread of content, about content as an extension of someone's individual personal brand and using that personal branding as an employee. I want to go back and make sure I have not paraphrasing this person too much here, but James's question is, do you feel that reps should create content at will and, quote, build the personal brand in order to spur trust in the bigger brand, thus moving the needle? Amy, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one that I personally think about a lot. I have a lot of firmly held beliefs, and I've got to think about what that means for my company and whether or not I'm like go hard at something or not. And so I think when you're thinking about, you know, your sales reps or somebody along those lines, like I think I guess it depends on the topic. I mean, you can get in a lot of trouble really quickly if you start running down a political path or around, you know, some firmly held beliefs. But there's other places where, you know, I'm very publicly out. I talk about my wife all the time. Like that just kind of is part of who I am. So I want to make sure that I share who I am and don't hide that. So it's not just hiding behind a corporate kind of brand concept, but also making sure that it's not kind of creating, I don't know, angst either in the market. I think that's a really tough one. I've run into that in prior companies where I was, you know, COO, where people were trying to figure out that exact question of like, okay, somebody posted something that was super political one way or the other. Do we ask them to take it down? I'm like, I mean, if it's their personal brand, they can kind of do what they want. I don't believe in policing somebody's personal brand personally. They may not align with your brand, and that may be a different kind of conversation you have of whether or not they're a good fit for your company. But I don't know that I personally believe you should be policing people's personal brands.
I think instead of policing, I do think we have to give guidance and structure. I think that Ryan gave a great example of the book he got when he tried to get out of a contract, right? That book and that delivery came from a culture where the priorities are set. We're going to treat people a certain way because here's what we value. That salesperson in that instance, or account manager, whoever sent it, they knew how to make that decision because they were given this kind of cultural value framework to operate in. And I think that is so specific per company that it is worth doing the work, to your point, Amy, to kind of frame out what is appropriate and what's not. But you can see companies that haven't done that work, they fall into this era of like, oh no, what do we do when someone posts something inappropriate or when they're called out for some kind of pandering behavior? It's what happens in those moments that indicate the work that was done or not done. And I think for marketers, what you have to do is say, as a company, where do we sit in the world of buyers? Patagonia, people know they're going to be politically minded and environmental first. They know their values. It's in everything they do. When they return the money they got from tax cuts, $10 million, and gave it to grassroots, you know, environmental organizations, that was right in line with their company values. And everyone in that business knows how to act because those values are clear. If it's politics, it does need to be a conversation that happens to say, as a business, maybe it's Microsoft, here's where we engage, here's where we don't. It's not policing, but it's giving guardrails so that you can bring your full self to work. I can post about my wife, I can be a real human being, but not bump up against the place where it becomes a brand risk. Like this is my PR person going, please don't post about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. It doesn't help anybody if we're selling software.
Yeah. I like that. I think there is an SLA, right, that goes back and forth between companies and the employees that they work with and the customers that they serve. And you need to triangulate all three at all times and understand what context and what content is going to be best serving of all three audiences without actually just completely watering it down so that it's not evocative. It's not personal anymore. I think that's really, really astutely said. We had a question come in from Rob that I think gets at the core of what the rest of this week's speaker series is about, but I want to tee it up for you guys to bat around a little bit before we dive into marketing, sales, and customer success. The question is, Forrester has done a lot of research around CX, and PX is now being introduced to it, and the different channels of engagement for CX and PX. Are you finding that your attempts at PX work across channels, or that you need to use different strategies for various channels? To be a potpourri, dive in, whoever's got a question, whoever's got an answer.
I do think that there's a difference, and it stems from the fact that people use different channels in a different way. And so just tailoring your communications in general is helpful to, to address the differences by channel. I think that also one of the things that might be keeping companies from investing more in the personalization is that it is perceived to be a lot of work, right? It's more work than I would have taken if I just did a cookie cutter approach. But if you take some sort of, make some sort of attempt around keeping some sort of records around what you know about someone. I know that sounds maybe a little creepy, but but making some sort of notes about, oh, they're from Boston, they're a big sports fan, they love barbecuing, like whatever it might be. I think you can reuse a lot of that kind of core information to help tailor each of those experiences and then adapt it to each of the different channels.
Yeah. As much about talking as it is listening, if not more listening, right? If you've absorbed that someone is a Bostonian barbecue enthusiast, like you're slim pickings around here in Boston, unless anybody can prove me wrong in the chat. But yeah, so like it's about listening and what you do with the information that you've received to then in return echo an experience that is personal. I love it. Very cool. We are at 1 minute past the hour, and I have one more question that I kind of want to pull the pin and launch the grenade in here for everybody to bat around a little bit. But the question is, as all of you are leaders, you are C-suite execs of your own companies, how can leaders address reps that don't think they're pandering, but they actually are? Big one. See, I told you, hold the pin.
So a rep that doesn't think they're pandering is a rep that thinks that there's some authenticity to what they're saying, or that it doesn't matter, right? I think that's the issue at hand, is do they understand the dangers of saying one thing and doing another, or saying one thing and then doing nothing? I think that's where education comes into play. I mean, sales reps aren't stupid. I mean, I think marketers sometimes they think of salespeople as coin-operated robots. I have immense respect for salespeople. They want efficiency. And I think sometimes in the sake of that efficiency and productivity, maybe they sacrifice the stuff that seems, to Ellie's point, counterproductive, that this takes too long, that I have deals to close. Being authentic gets in my way. I think as marketers, this is sales enablement. We have to help them deliver real value, authentic value, help them see what buyers need. So they're not falling into the trap of copy, paste, send, send it off. And I think that, gifts like this that MK sent me through Alyce is a book with a freaking flask, like a flask. Hello, this is the coolest thing I've ever received. If we can give them the ability to create moments like this for buyers and make it easy and fast, we can take away the risk of them just saying whatever it takes to get the meeting. And I think that's where I hope we are moving. We have to still be productive and efficient, but we have to do it in a way that respects the dangers of just being more noise, more marketing BS, more empty pandering.
I totally agree. I think that especially with sales, you need to make the easiest path the right path, where it's, the thing that takes the least time, the thing that is the easiest for them to execute is what you want them to do. And so, even creating templates and, having places in those templates be where you can pop in, something that's personalized to that particular person, but making it really easy for them to execute on that is really key. And it's much more likely that they'll actually execute it. The other piece is just educating them on why all of this matters. We've done a bunch of training around that too, like things about research. When you're researching prospects before you're talking to them, you're looking for X, but here's why you're looking for it. Here's how you're going to integrate it back into your communications. Here are some examples of what that looks like. Then it sinks in, and it's not just, follow steps 1, 2, and 3. It's here's what we're trying to achieve.
And I think as well, it's, obviously good sales reps do a lot of social selling today, right? Where they're going to our Twitters, they're going to our Instagrams, they're trying to find something that's relevant that they can talk about. In my mind as well, it's a little bit like pandering. So I love Housekeeping Rules. I'm obsessed with the series. And I got a direct mail once from an AE, and it was like a cup, like a Frank Underwood mug, and it said Frank Underwood on it, and I loved it. I think he didn't do a great job of follow through in the whole sales process, that I would say. But what I thought was great is, like, he didn't say to me like, oh my God, I love House of Cards too. And that was a lie, right? Like, I think it's like all about being authentic as a sales rep. And even if he hadn't watched that, I think if he would have said like, oh my gosh, I keep hearing about this show everywhere, maybe I need to watch it. Like, what do you like most about it? Would have like gotten me like talking about my love for it. So again, you don't have to like know everyone and be able to connect on everything, but I think you should be able to ask questions and be really authentic. And that's a way for them to try and create more of that one-to-one experience without pandering.
Nice. I think, you said it earlier today, Ryan, that most people want to be good. Most people want to do good. Most people want to create marketing and selling motions and servicing motions that are very, very personal. It's just hard because it's a lot of work to do. And it does require a lot of empathy, which is not always a muscle group that a lot of people have baked into their business practices. They may have worked it into their 5 to 9, but not always in the 9 to 5. I want to thank everybody for their time today and their expertise and their passion about the subject of personal experience and how this is the future. Any final parting words before we move on with our days and deliver more personal experiences?
I have one, obviously, because it's me and I always have something to say. Look at the Business Roundtable's August 2019 shift from shareholder to stakeholder. This is the shift that businesses are moving into. The very purpose of a business is being redefined. PX fits perfectly in this. Moving from efficiency to empathy is part of this shift. You are not going to be behind the curve, which most marketers are scared of doing at a personal level. You are not going to be behind the curve if you are prioritizing this hard stuff. This is where business is moving. This is where investors and buyers are expecting companies to operate. So take a look at that Business Roundtable prediction piece and PX it up, people. MK, thanks for putting this together. Really, really awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. I could not have done it without you. And if anybody is interested in learning more about what Katie was alluding to and the fact that like it isn't as hard as we are perceiving it to be, please join us for the rest of the week where we have 3 more days worth of speaker series. Tomorrow's track is dedicated just to the sales reps, where we will be featuring Keenan, the author of Gap Selling, who's going to spend some time talking with us about what it means to be personal and selling. And then we have an afternoon of star-studded panel as well too, with sales reps in biz dev. We have managers and VPs in general sales as well too, talking about how people buy from people, not just from a coin machine these days. Then Thursday, we're going to spend some time talking with marketers, where we'll talk about, trade shows and event and field marketing and how field marketers really can take it that next level. This whole experience we've just been through in these last few months with trade shows being canceled, you can still deliver a very personal experience. And the lessons that we've learned from this era that we're in and how they translate from here on out are going to be hugely impactful. And then we're going to round out the week on Friday. Well, we're going to talk about CX, right? The customer experience, and where PX is actually the missing link between all of those experiences that you're missing or sending out to your customers. Guys, thank you again so much for making this power panel come to life. It was such a pleasure to host you and get to pick your brains for about an hour and 8 minutes. Thank you for everybody who dialed in. It was so great to have you here, and we'll see you throughout the week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.